This hour, we're excited to be joined by Dr. Justin Gardner, Assistant Professor of Creative Writing and author of Beneath the Shadow, Legacy and Longing in the Antarctic, a compelling first-hand account that breathes new life into the 19th century journals of Antarctic explorers such as Captain Robert Falcon Scott, Sir Ernest Henry Shackleton, and Captain Ronald Amundsen. Today, Dr. Gardner is giving us an inside look at his new book, which won't be released until early 2024, where he combines his personal experiences and his creative research to write a story with a main character near to his own heart.
Thank you. I'm going to read from my manuscript, Small Altars, which will be published in early 2024 with Tupelo Press. The book is about my brother who passed away 3 years ago. It's also about comic books. As kids, my brother and I were really into comic books and superheroes, and I decided to explore that material as a way of talking about his life and death and our evolving relationship. So it's written in short sections that are meant to recall the panels of a comic book, with the white space surrounding it operating as the gutters, if you will. So I'm going to read two short sections from this, or from early on in the book. And there are also visuals. When I was putting together this manuscript, I initially was thinking of it as possibly being working as sort of a work of graphic nonfiction. And so I reached out to a former student of mine who is an illustrator to see if he would be willing to contribute some images for the book. And my idea was for him to do rather straightforward visual representations of the scenes I was describing in the book in comic form. His idea, which was much better than mine, and one of the reasons why collaboration is so wonderful, was to depict my brother with various superpowers, and to leave those powers unexplained or have them be irrelevant to what was going on inside the book. So the first image you're going to see, you'll see that my brother has bolts shooting out of his eyes, and the second image, he's levitating several feet off the ground. So here goes. All superheroes have an origin story, the series of events, most often tragic, that give birth to their powers and lead them into becoming who they are today. Tony Stark, before he became Iron Man, was a millionaire playboy and an ingenious scientist. They say his character was modeled after Howard Hughes, without the crippling neurosis. Telling which plot lines we remain true to, which details we add and subtract, what we choose to replace. My brother was born with a borderline learning disability. He did not excel at sports or school. He never had a girlfriend or finished college or got a decent job. In his 20s, he was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, and much of the 15 years that followed was wasted away in breakdowns, treatments, a revolving series of doctors and meds. If this were a Hollywood movie, or even a decent comic book, we could expect here a turning. Then one day it happened, and he became. But in the theater of this life, my brother was only ever cast to play himself. Minor role, thankless task. And so, after a few years where he had kept things mostly together, he contracted a rare form of cancer. And 3 years later, at the age of 44, he died. My brother's story is one of the saddest I know. But much of that comes down to me, my failure to recognize how he could ever be content happy even, with what little he had. A job mopping floors, a one-bedroom apartment. Years, whole decades in fact, when our aging father and mother were his only real friends. In the picture I keep framed on the desk in my study, my brother is only a small boy, 6 or 7 I'd guess, though there is no way for me to be sure. Lying on his back on the brown shag carpet of our childhood home, his legs are crossed in a manner that could only be comfortable for a child. He is listening to a record on our father's turntable, plugged in with a large headset of headphones, the kind that would soon drift out of fashion for several decades, then circle strangely back in. He is dressed in the type of slacks we only ever wore on holidays or for church, as well as an ugly knit sweater and a pair of bright blue sneakers with yellow stripes that I would gladly trade away $50, my stack of X-Men comic books, and whatever may be left of my Halloween candy, if only they could somehow fit my overgrown feet. I'd like to know what he's listening to, but the album's cover, within his reach there on the carpet, is blurred. In this snapshot moment, as my brother gazes intently at the ceiling, I wonder what he thinks will become of his life. I wonder if, already, there is some part of him that worries none of this will work out, that the world will open up for him like an empty box, closing itself up with him inside. I don't know which of our parents took this photograph, but I hope they had the decency to leave him there undisturbed, that he wasn't interrupted with calls for dinner or chores, or that I didn't run in from the other room, hounding him to join me in another game. Because what I want more than anything is for him to remain right where he is, alone with his music, his thoughts, before the last song is over, before the record slows to its inevitable standstill, and the needle jerks back abruptly into place, before the whole roughed world barges in again, leaving him to where he has to go next.
Wow, Dr. Gardner, what a moving and personal story. I appreciate you sharing that with us. Tell me about your process for creating this piece.
Yeah, so the personal was certainly there from the beginning, and it was going to be the core of the piece. But when I teach, the kind of hand motion I use the most is sort of this, that you have to be in close to your material, and then you have to step back further away. And so right from the start, I knew that I had to figure out how I was going to gain distance from the material, and that really came about through the focus on comic books, and through doing research about comic books. So when I first started working on the manuscript, I really wasn't writing the personal material. I was learning about comic books, reading books, getting things from interlibrary loan. I was taking down notes of terminology and things like that. I was looking at old comic books that I remembered from my youth. I was watching Marvel superhero movies. So that was sort of really where the book took shape was first from that. And it was kind of easy to add in the more personal sections once I had that kind of scaffolding in place.
So I'm curious to get your perspective on this concept of creative work as research. Talk to me a little bit about the research side of this and the contribution that this type of work makes to society.
Oh, sure. So, just as the research, like I said, it was kind of like where this manuscript started, but it also really came about in important moments of the composition process to move it forward. So, the book is largely about comic books. My brother was also very much he loved classical music, and he played the piano, and there was a piece in particular that I listened to a lot, a video recording of him playing Debussy's Clair de Lune, and I knew I was gonna write about that piece of music as well, and I was looking into that song, and found out that it's based on a poem by Paul Verlaine. And I also write poetry. I teach creative writing for a living, and it was an amazing sort of revelation, in ways kind of sad, that I didn't realize that possible connection until after my brother had passed away. But it was a way for me to kind of let myself more into the book. I could also talk about writing, which I love, and French symbolist poetry, right? And so it was about comic books, and then I found that, like, through these other connections, I could add other things. So I think of the work as a sort of braided structure. There's a thread about comic books, there's a thread about cancer, there's a thread about mental illness, there's a thread about music, and all of those I knew were important to the story of my brother and to the book. But I also had to figure out how those threads intertwined. And research was helpful in that. So, for instance, I learned that India ink, which is the preferred medium for cartoonists, is actually used in pathology laboratories to mark tumor recession margins. And in the book, that's a really kind of small moment, but for me as a writer, it was an epiphany. It was like this sort of like belief that, like, these threads really do go together, and in unexpected and in interesting ways. And so I really felt like the research side of the project was deeply intertwined with the creative and the personal.
How do you hope that this work honors your brother's memory? And what do you want readers to take away as they go through this book?
Sure. The book's about comic books and superheroes and music, but beneath and above all of that, it's a book about grief. And my hope certainly is that readers would not only identify with that, but genuinely find something valuable in it to take back to their life and their experiences with grief, especially anyone who has a family member who struggles with mental illness, or anyone who's lost a sibling at a relatively young age.
Dr. Gardner, thank you so much for sharing your work and your time with us.